Hey, today I'm gonna review the legendary, well, not quite legendary, 2004 horror Sato classic Saw, directed by James Wan. James Wan, since Saw, has become a relatively established director in the world of horror. He directed Insidious 1 and 2, which, in my opinion, are victims of modern horror cliches, but he also directed The Conjuring, that most would agree is a very solid film, including me. But now he's moved on from horror and directed the extremely well-received Fury 7, and is to direct Jason Momoa's Aquaman, which is a part of the DC cinematic movement. But he hasn't completely abandoned his horror roots, as he will be directing The Conjuring 2 and another horror film that I know little about called Malignant Man. Wow, I just spent a lot of time talking about James Wan, and I'm still doing it, so moving on. The film stars Cary Elwes, an extremely established director famous for his roles in Princess Bride, Glory, Robin Hood Men in Tights, among many other films. Alongside him is Lee Winnell, I hate doing this, who co-wrote the script. Danny Glover, another established actor of Lethal Weapon, The Color Purple, and a lot of other things, and Dinah Mayer, known for Starship Trooper and Dragonheart. That's it for the cast! Time for story mode. The main plot is two grown men wake up chained to the wall in a disgusting bathroom. They don't know how they got there, but soon enough they're forced to make some extremely difficult choices. Making these choices are where the best drama and horror come from. There are also some subplots like the police investigation of the disappearances and some other unfortunate souls that have been captured by the mysterious Jigsaw. That's basically it. Moving on. First the bad, as usual. There are many continuity errors throughout, to the point where it gets distracting. I'm not going to point them all out, as it would either take too long or I'd be treading in spoiler waters. Wow. Treading in spoiler waters. That just sounds so stupid. But anyway, I'm supposed to be ridiculing Saw, not myself right now, so... Another negative is the actor that is paired with Cary Elwes holds him back a lot. He's just really not a good actor and doesn't belong here. I know, this was low budget, so they used one of the writers to play him, and he really is noticeably, well, acting. The other issue with the relatively low budget is that it limits a great director like James Wan's creativity, but he does add some neat, innovative tricks. But still, I'd like to see Wan Saw with a big budget. I mean, look what he's doing now with a big budget. Moving on. There are some awkward moments in the screenplay. Though dramatic, it is extremely flawed in general. But the greatness of this film doesn't come from the screenplay, it comes from everything I will mention in the good. Another thing that doesn't add to its greatness is the investigation subplot. It just is lacking compared to the rest of the film and sort of brings the entire film down. Not that it's bad, it's just not as good or dramatically fueled as the rest. And of course there's no gore. Lastly, in the rest of the film there's a lot of gore, to the point where some of the audience could find it revolting, but compared to the many sequels this is kinda tame. But nonetheless, many people find it disgusting, which could either be a good or bad thing depending on who you ask. I'm indifferent. It's not pleasant to watch, but in this film, unlike the sequels, most of it was necessary to advance the plot. Now the good. This is unfairly put in a category of film. I hate the name of this category, and I don't like referring to any film as this, but it's quote-unquote torture porn. This film is ridiculed so much for being that, and some people even claim that it is the original torture porn film and that it coined the phrase. First of all, it doesn't show that much gore, and while some of the sequels could be argued into said category, most of it is psychological horror. Secondly, that category was around long before this, trust me. The 70s and 80s are filled with quote-unquote torture porn garbage, so don't blame Saw. Anyway, the thing that separates Saw from that category are, firstly, that it is pretty tamed enough to be viewed by a mainstream audience. Secondly, the story is interesting and actually evolves throughout the series. The killer, Jigsaw, is just extremely interesting, especially in his motives. Most of the film is a what would you do situation that really makes you think. which is good cinema. Putting yourself in the situation that the characters you're watching is what makes this into a great film, and an extremely underrated one at that. Moving on, the characters, though at times poorly portrayed, are good and developed, which makes you feel for them and relate for them even more, making it all the more terrifying of a what would you do situation. Also, Carey always just does phenomenal in his role. He's just so fun to watch. The directing by James Wan is very well done with some interesting editing, which some find annoying that I find kind of cool and intense. But that's just my opinion. Another thing is the extremely awesome music. I'm just gonna play it for a second here because it is so cool and I could listen to it all day without getting bored. It reminds me of Requiem for a Dream score, which is also equally amazing. Here it goes. Isn't that awesome? Anyway, moving on. The Jigsaw puppet has a creative and fear-inducing design, which has since become one of the most major horror icons, instantly recognizable with a strong association to this film. Lastly, the twist, which I won't give away, is pretty solid, though flawed. Many people get angry with this twist due to continuity errors and blah 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 blah, but despite that, it is pretty unexpected and better than your average Shyamalan twist. In the end, Saw is a misjudged film with great psychological horror, great atmosphere, great performances, great drama, and of course, a great what would you do situation. It deserves to be looked at more and not to be skipped due to the unfair torture porn label.